Hi, I'm Greg Dell with Attorneys Dell and Schaefer, and today Stephen Jessup and I are going to talk about Unum long-term disability claim handling. And by claim handling, it's a unique service that we offer in which we manage claims for long-term disability claimants. And the goal is that we do everything we can to keep your benefits from being denied. And so in this video, we're going to talk about some tips and different things so that you can learn what it takes to keep your benefits from getting denied. And Steve, when it comes to a person who's already been approved, should they have an expectation that they're going to stay on claim for as long as they want?
No. I mean, these policies are going to have, maturation dates of, either 65, your Social Security retirement age, or if you have individual products, potentially for your lifetime. So there's this idea that they can go for that long, but the reality of, disability insurance, as we always say, there's no such thing as a guaranteed benefit. Unum is certainly going to continue to, investigate, request updated information, and quite frankly, we deal with a lot of denial. So it's certainly not something that you're on claim and they're going to leave you be, indefinitely.
And a lot of people think that because they've got approved, because they sometimes get confused, Social Security disability, a lot of times you get approved and it's like you never hear from anybody.
Correct.
But with long-term disability and specifically Unum, how often should a claimant assume that someone at Unum is looking at their claim?
Every month. Quite honestly, prior to you and I meeting for this, I was working on an appeal on a Unum, and when you go through, and you've seen it too, their internal SOAP notes, you will see every month multiple entries for follow-ups on medicals, claim forms, reach out to the client, or their own internal processes that they do with their vocational and medical departments to get updates on files to see if they should be updating information, sending out additional forms. They are looking at it. Every month that you get a check, someone on that end is approving the claim, so that check gets released. So you can expect, even if they're not reaching out to you, they are looking at everything about your file that they have every month.
Yeah, so we know the internal workings of Unum. We've each reviewed thousands of claim files, litigated hundreds, if not thousands of claims against Unum. And so we've seen the way they work. We could basically do the training for their department, although we'd likely change the way they do things. But, the point is that they have a claims person who's assigned to the claim. And many people watching this video have probably already had 2 or 3 or 4 different claims people because of the turnover. And that person, like you mentioned, has to report to someone or file a report. Or there's always someone above. Unum's a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company, and there's reporting. So it's not a computer that's automatically saying, okay, we're paying this month, we're paying next month. So there's physical hands on the file every month. And which brings to the point is, when do you see problems develop, generally, what things lead to problems for someone who's on claim and then all of a sudden they're getting denied?
Well, generally, if you do get on claim, the things that are going to lead to problems are if it's an employer-provided group disability policy, your own occupation period, 12 months, 24 months, whatever that may be, getting close to that review. But even going away from that is claim forms. Claim forms, if they're not submitted in a timely fashion, or, you get calls sometimes, hey, they've been reaching out to my doctors and they want to speak to my doctors. That's generally not a good sign when they're doing that. So the problems kind of occur when there might be some type of breakdown between you, your doctors, or the way the presentation of information. There's always going to be kind of historic times where there's issues. Getting onto long-term disability in and of itself is a big milestone because a good number of cases are going to be denied there. One thing you always have to take into account with Unum too is just the multitude of policies they have. So you have your Unum group insurance policies from your employer, but a lot of people watching this could have individual disability products, and that can be from New York Life, Paul Revere, Unum Provident Life and Accident. All of them, run by Unum now, but at the end of the day, all those policies have different types of language requirements. So there's really no hard, fast rule like with some other insurance companies. But on the group side of things, you can expect while you were transitioning in from own occupation to any occupation, and then on your individual disability products, that's a little more up in the air. And a lot of times you generally won't know that you're having a problem till realistically it's too late. I was just recently working on an appeal for a lady who had an individual disability product that Unum is handling. And it came down to one day they called her for a field interview. And in that situation, they found a lot of stuff online about, some travel activity and this. But by the time that field interview occurred, when I looked at the claim file, there was already a multitude of steps leading up to basically what they were trying to, finalize a denial of it. So you always have to be on your toes with them. They didn't get to be the biggest insurance company out there for no good reason.
Right. I want to talk. You brought up so many good points there, and one of the real important ones, and which goes right to the heart of our claim handling service, is the claim forms. And I mean, so many. You have the claimant form, and you have the attending physician form, and let's go through each of those, because that's a big part of what we do when we represent someone. Is we fill out those forms with the claimant and with their doctors. But why shouldn't someone think it's just fill in the form, it is what it is? Why is it so much more than that?
If you commit something to writing, it's going to last, and for all intents and purposes, regardless of a group policy or an individual policy and the laws that are going to govern them, having that physical concrete piece of information, if you mark the wrong thing, if you indicate something that isn't true on it, that is going to be lasting, and it's always going to be used against you. So it is a matter of, complete honesty being the best policy, but it's also presenting the information appropriately. And these forms are meant to be cookie cutters. It doesn't matter what your medical condition is, physically speaking. Now, if you have a mental health condition, there are different forms for that. But generally speaking, no matter what physical medical condition you have, they're going to send you the same claim form, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that doesn't maybe apply or doesn't quite apply to you. But a lot of people sometimes rush just to put down some type of answer, and that's all stuff that can be used against you. Like we've always said, especially in claim forms, using words like never and these finite, answers are never good. In that, you say, oh, I can never do X, Y, and Z. Well, if Unum finds you doing, if they catch you on surveillance, if they see things online of you doing these, they're going to say, well, they lied to me on this form, and it may have been a small, innocuous, lie, but they're going to extrapolate that over to everything else you've told them. And once they put your character into question, it's really a slippery slope towards them trying to find ways to deny it. I mean, you and I have seen it multiple times over, that if they sink their teeth into something that they think justifies, why they don't think you should have benefits, they're going to put the blinders on and really just work towards, making all the pieces fit that agenda.
Yeah, well, one thing for sure with Unum, once they lose credibility in you, you are done. It does. I mean, you could almost break your leg the next day and they'd be like, no, you already could do that. I mean, That's a pretty extreme. But they're if they see you on video and they made up their mind, they are done, and they usually, they'll stand by it. Certainly they'll consider other information, but to their fault, they can be bullnosed in that way.
And we usually talk a lot in the context of these ERISA group disability policies of them doing this, but you and I have a lot of experience. We're representing a handful of clients now that were on individual disability policies. They purchased on their own for over a decade. And as soon as Unum got a bad taste in their mouth, as ridiculous as it was, they've just, towed that line, and there's no turning back from there.
Right. Well, one advantage is in ERISA, because we went to individual, now we'll talk about ERISA in the group, is that one person could see video and be like, no, I'm done. But when you do an appeal, while you do have to appeal back to Unum, you do get you're supposed to get an independent look at it, and that person could have a difference of opinion, and we do win a substantial amount of those appeals. So when I say you're done with that one person, forget it. But the next person is a human being, has their own judicial nature, their own thought process, and they will have to consider other information. But I want to continue with you I want to get into the attending physician statement, because to me, that's a lot more complicated and a lot more pit holes. And I think there's a lot of bias in those forms that doctors have to fill out. And those are the real forms, I think, that really mean, that means something. Not necessarily because I think Unum's going to really consider them a lot, but I think it's something that we need to rely upon in the event that the claim is denied. So talk a little bit about the bias, and talk about how we work with the claimant and their doctors to fill these claims out properly.
Well, the bias is really not giving doctors room to express an opinion, or notifying of an option. I think the biggest grievance would be when they're trying to determine physical abilities to work, in this idea of sedentary, light, medium, heavy, very heavy. A lot of times they pigeonhole it into such a way that the doctor, if looking at the claim form, the only option they have is, they may think, hey, my patient can't work at all, and they see sedentary as the lowest level, that's granted to them. So it's almost like leading the doctors to check that box so they can check something, and it walks it into a denial. So it is set up to fit what Unum is ultimately going to want it to. And it's not so easy in a couple lines to be able to properly express what's happening to someone medically and what those restrictions and limitations are. The medical record should ultimately be what kind of, is relied upon and governs all of that. But Unum's claim forms are meant, I wouldn't say necessarily meant, but they're drafted very intelligently to assist Unum if they do want to look to find a basis to deny a claim.
Have you seen Unum provide specific forms to specific medical conditions, or is it always general?
My experience off the top of my head, general. Now I'm sure there are out there, but for all intents and purposes, they're general, with the exception of a mental health questionnaire. They will do a separate mental health questionnaire, but for physical medical conditions, generally speaking, it's going to be pretty specific. Now, if you get into, individual disability policies, and if you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're a dentist, they do have some specialized forms that are occupation specific to that. But from a medical standpoint, it's usually a one size fits all situation.
When dealing with Unum specifically, and they used to ask for a lot of field interviews, and you and I are filming this video in August of 2020. We're dealing with COVID-19 now, and they're not doing those now, and they haven't done them in a couple months. But I'm starting to see that they're doing more and more phone interviews, maybe becoming a little bit more diligent. And what should these claimants be aware of if they're getting called, to speak with the claim rep?
Sometimes I think, it's a matter of checking and crossing T's, dotting I's, just to, client contact on a file. There is a good number of that you do see, even with clients that we've represented, especially over a long period of time, that these field interviews and these calls are pretty benign at times, especially I think now in this COVID thing, whether it's a matter of them trying to be a little more in touch with their clients, if you will. But you do have to be worried. And you're right, they're not doing the in-person ones right now, obviously. I've seen them put out requests for it that have been shot down, and they do them over the phone. They are still using an outside company to conduct those. But when they're using an outside company to conduct them especially, I think that's when you really need to be worried, because that is complete fact finding. And those can be real laborious interviews, in that this company and whoever they have knows nothing about the file. And they're basically asking the most basic of questions starting from the get-go. But they're going to draft up a big report that someone on Unum's side is going to look for any inaccuracies or errors. You always have to be, unfortunately, careful that they may try to get you to answer in such a way or admit to something or say something that they can then open up a more broad investigation. And like we discussed with our clients, answer the question. Don't offer additional information outside of what they want to know. Because a lot of people, I think, will get nervous, and then they almost try to sell the disability. It's not to say they're not disabled, but they try to really overemphasize, and it gets to the point of embellishment. And again, it's going back to this idea of if they can attack your credibility in a way, then they can find other reasons and ways to use that to attack your claim.
Well, I think we hit on a lot of the basic points about the claim handling. I mean, the message is really to be prepared. The advantage for people who hire us is that we've handled hundreds of different medical conditions. We've seen all of the Unum definitions of disability. We're aware of the different types of occupations and how they evaluate it. And you really got to be specific to all three of those categories. Occupation, medical, and medical condition. And by taking those things into consideration, you can really put yourself in the best position to avoid a claim denial, because if Unum has the opportunity and they find some little thing, there's no downside, there's no risk for them to deny a claim, because they're like, well, you'll just have to appeal it, and the person that suffers is the claimant.
Yeah, you're 100% right. With the increase of cases and everything, it's easy. It gets it off their desk onto someone else's to do that review. And also, going back with regards to dealing with Unum, our dealings with Unum, and this holds true with a lot of the insurance companies. They're aware of who we are. They know who we are. We know a lot of their claims people, in various departments on first name basis at this point. And there is also some, I get it sometimes, oh, I'm glad you're on this case. We've been trying to get X, Y, and Z information. We've been having a hard time. We know what they want. We help make their jobs easier in getting that information, and getting that information over to them timely, correct, and all that type of stuff really increases the odds of the claim being approved. So not only is it a matter of taking some of that stress off the client, it can also help smooth everything over with Unum to get to that end result of a continued monthly benefit being paid.
Right, and the other thing is, and I forgot to mention this, is that a lot of people go, well, does it look bad that I have a lawyer? Like, am I worried about something? And really, it's quite the opposite. When we handle so many claims on behalf of people for, with Unum, and we have a good working relationship with Unum, and it becomes a business-to-business relationship versus a business-to-consumer. And when you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of dollars over the lifetime of this policy, which this policy is a contract, you wouldn't buy a couple hundred, it's a complex situation. They have tons of lawyers. You should be represented, because they're not really looking out for your best interests, and they don't take it as you have something to hide or whatever. They understand, especially with our law firm, that we're there to advise you because it's not what you do. You're sick. You can't work. You don't know how to manage a claim like they're a professional, and you don't want to be bullied or get yourself in a position because you make a mistake where you're going to lose your benefits. So it's not frowned upon at all. It's actually a benefit, and I believe Unum enjoys that working relationship, and we don't try to make it a difficult process. We try to work with them, but make them live by the terms of the policy, be reasonable and fair, and do everything we can to keep our clients' claim being approved. So we have tons of videos available where we talk about Unum in all different aspects, every different medical condition, every different occupation. We encourage you to consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, where you can see lots of videos that we're filming on a weekly basis. We're available at any given time, most importantly, to provide you with a free initial consultation where Stephen or myself or any of our disability lawyers will discuss your Unum disability claim with you, no matter what stage you're at. And we appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Thank you for considering our law firm.